In the heart of Seoul, where the skyline is dominated by towering glass giants, one building stood taller and more imposing than the rest: Jeon Enterprises. This was not merely a corporate office. It was the nerve center of South Korea's economy, a multi-billion-dollar empire that had its claws in everything from technology to global shipping. It was, indisputably, the #1 company in the country. At the very top, in an office that overlooked the entire city, like a king watching over his kingdom, lived the man behind the power, Jeon Jungkook. At only 31 years old, Jungkook was a phenomenon. In the eyes of the public, he was the brilliant, cold, and calculated CEO who had doubled the company's worth in record time. But behind the polished mahogany doors and the expensive tailored suits, there was another side to him. In the dark, grittier world of Seoul's underground, he was known simply as JK, the ruthless leader of the BTS gang, the most powerful mafia organization in Asia. Jungkook was a man of lethal elegance. He had a sharp, chiseled jawline, and eyes as dark and deep as the midnight sea, eyes that could make a seasoned businessman tremble with a single glance. His raven black hair was often styled in a sharp undercut, and his muscular frame was always encased in bespoke black suits that cost more than a common man's yearly salary. However, Jungkook did not rule alone. His inner circle consisted of 6 men, his childhood friends, who were as dangerous as they were successful. They held high-profile executive positions at Jeon Enterprises by day and served as the elite pillars of the BTS gang by night. Kim Namjoon, RM, the brilliant vice chairman and director, the strategist who moved pieces on the board before the enemy even knew they were playing. Min Yoongi, Sugar, the CFO, a man of few words but a genius with numbers and information. If you owed him money, there was nowhere on earth you could hide. Kim Seok-jin, Jin, the CMO. His charm and worldwide handsome face were the perfect distraction for the company's more clandestine operations. Jung Ho-sik, J-Hope, the COO. He managed the company's logistics and the gang's street operations with terrifying precision and speed. Park Jimin, Jimin, the head of strategic planning. His innocent smile hid a mind that could manipulate anyone into doing exactly what he wanted. Kim Tae-hyung, V, the head of legal affairs. He was the one who ensured that neither the law nor the rival gangs ever got a hand on the Jeon Empire. Together, they were an untouchable wall of power. Miles away from the glittering lights of the Jeon headquarters, in a small, cramped apartment, YN was struggling. At 21, life in Seoul was proving to be much harder than she had ever imagined. She had moved to the city with big dreams, but those dreams had been replaced by the grueling reality of a dead-end job at a small logistics firm. It was 7:30 p.m. YN walked through her front door, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Her feet ached from standing all day, and her boss's constant shouting still rang in her ears. She tossed her worn-out bag onto the floor and slumped onto her tiny sofa. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered to the empty room. After a lonely dinner of instant ramyun, she sat down at her small desk. Every night was the same. She would open her old laptop and scroll through job listings. She was desperate. She needed a way out, a way to support herself and find a career that actually meant something. As she scrolled through the endless list of mundane office jobs, a bold heading caught her eye. Personal manager to the CEO, Jeon Enterprises. Oyen's heart skipped a beat. Jeon Enterprises. It was the kind of place people only dreamed of working. It was a place for the elite, the geniuses, the most qualified professionals in the world. She looked at the requirements. The job description was intense, managing the CEO's schedule, handling personal affairs, and being available 24/7. But then she saw the salary. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. 1 month's salary at Jeon Enterprises was equivalent to a year's pay at her current job. "Personal manager to Jeon Jungkook," she murmured. She had seen him in magazines. He was intimidatingly handsome and famously cold. but she was desperate. She was smart, organized, and she had nothing to lose. With trembling fingers, she updated her resume, making sure every detail was perfect. She wrote a cover letter that focused on her resilience and her ability to handle high-pressure environments. With a deep breath, she clicked the submit button. "Please," she prayed silently, "just give me a chance." The next day at work was miserable. Her boss had given her double the workload, and she spent the entire day feeling like she was drowning. By the time she got home, she was ready to give up. But as she checked her phone, she saw a notification that made her blood turn to ice. An email from Jeon Enterprises recruitment team. She opened it with shaky hands. "Dear YN, we have reviewed your application for the position of personal manager to the CEO. We are pleased to inform you that you have been shortlisted for the final interview round. Your interview is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the Jeon Enterprises headquarters. Please bring a printed copy of your resume. Regards, Human Resources." Yan let out a scream of joy that echoed through her thin walls. She couldn't believe it. Out of thousands of applicants, they had chosen her. The rest of the night was a blur of activity. She ironed her only good formal suit, polished her shoes, and stayed up late researching everything she could about Jeon Jungkook. She was terrified, yes, but more than that, she was excited. This was her one chance at a new life. She set 3 different alarms on her phone, making sure she wouldn't be a second late. As she lay in bed, her mind raced with possibilities. She didn't know that she had just stepped into the sights of a man who played with lives for a living. She didn't know that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. She finally fell asleep, dreaming of the glass tower and the mysterious CEO who held her future in his hands. The sun had barely begun to cast its golden glow over the busy streets of Seoul, but YN was already wide awake. Today was the most important day of her life. She dressed with extreme care, choosing a neutral-colored skirt and a crisp, perfectly ironed blazer. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, she tried to mask her nervousness with a confident smile. "You can do this, YN. It's just an interview," she whispered to herself. By 8 a.m., she was out the door. The city was a chaotic buzz of commuters, but YN moved with a singular focus. Clutched in her hand was a professional folder containing her resume and the notes she had spent all night preparing. At exactly 8:45 a.m., she stood before the majestic glass entrance of Jeon Enterprises. The building was so tall it seemed to pierce the sky, and its grandeur was both inspiring and terrifying. Stepping inside, she felt the cool, controlled air of the lobby. Everything was made of marble and expensive glass. She approached the reception desk, her heart thumping against her ribs. "Good morning," she said, her voice slightly trembling. "I'm YN, here for the personal manager interview with the CEO." The receptionist, looking as flawless as a mannequin, checked the system. "Good morning. You are on the list. Please take elevator 3 to the 10th floor. Good luck." The 10th floor was even more intimidating. A large, minimalist waiting lounge was already occupied by about a dozen other candidates. They all looked like they belonged in a high-fashion magazine. Expensive suits, designer bags, and an air of absolute confidence. YN took a seat in the corner. Every time the heavy mahogany door of the interview room opened, a candidate would walk out. Some looked pale, others looked like they were on the verge of tears, and none of them stayed to chat. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the occasional ticking of a clock. Finally, the assistant called out, "YN, the CEO will see you now." YN's throat went dry. She stood up, her legs feeling like lead, and walked toward the door. She took a deep breath, knocked softly, and entered. The office was massive, but the atmosphere was freezing. In the center, behind a vast desk that looked like it cost more than YN's entire apartment building, sat Jeon Jungkook. He didn't look up immediately. He was dressed in a dark navy suit, his posture radiating power and boredom. His presence was so overwhelming that the air in the room felt thin. This was the man who ruled the corporate world, and secretly, the underworld. "Sit," Jungkook said. His voice was deep, smooth, and incredibly cold. YN sat down, placing her folder on the desk. Jungkook finally looked at her. His dark, sharp eyes scanned her from head to toe, making her feel completely exposed. He picked up her resume, flipped through it for a few seconds, and then tossed it back onto the desk like it was trash. "So, YN?" he began, leaning back. "You want to be my personal manager? This role requires handling extreme stress. Your previous job was at a tiny company with zero stakes. Tell me, why should I even consider you?" YN tried to stay calm. "Sir, I am a fast learner, and I am incredibly dedicated. I can handle—" Jungkook cut her off with a cold stare. "Everyone says they are dedicated. I need results, not words." Jungkook leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Let's test your dedication. Imagine we are in the middle of a $5 billion deal. I have a document ready to sign, but you notice a $500 million error. If you stop me, the deal collapses and the investors lose faith. If you stay silent, the company loses $500 million, and it will be your fault for not catching it." He paused, watching her like a predator watching its prey. "What do you do? Do you ruin the deal by speaking up, or do you let me sign a flawed contract?" YN felt the sweat on her palms. It was a classic trick question. If she said she'd speak up, he'd say she lacked timing. If she said she'd wait, he'd call her irresponsible. "Sir," YN said bravely, "I would write a very brief note, just the figure, and place it on your desk discreetly. You could then decide how to proceed without alerting the investors." Jungkook's lip curled into a mocking half-smile. "A note? You think a piece of paper is the solution to a billion-dollar crisis? You're suggesting you'd rather hide behind a note than be a direct, effective manager?" Every answer she gave was met with a sharper, more brutal counterattack from him. He was systematically tearing down her confidence. Finally, Jungkook stood up. He looked at her with pure disdain, as if she were a waste of his time. "Listen to me, YN," he said, his voice now loud and harsh. "A CEO needs a manager with iron nerves and sharp brains. You have neither. You froze at a hypothetical question. How could you possibly handle my real life?" He stepped around the desk, towering over her. "You are not selected. This is Jeon Enterprises, not some neighborhood cafe. You don't belong here." He pointed toward the door. "You may leave. Don't waste any more of my time." The words hit YN like a physical blow. Her face burned with shame. She gathered her folder with trembling hands, unable to even look him in the eye. She felt small, insulted, and completely crushed. As she walked out of the room, she felt a hot tear escape her eye. The interview hadn't just been a rejection. It had been a calculated humiliation. She hurried toward the elevator, her only thought being to get out of that building as fast as possible. As the heavy mahogany door of Jungkook's office clicked shut behind her, YN felt as if her heart had been crushed. The cold, recycled air of the hallway now felt suffocating. Her hands were clenched tightly around her folder, her knuckles turning white. The echoes of Jungkook's words, "You have no brain," and "You don't belong here," played on a loop in her mind like a cruel melody. She wasn't just sad. She was furious. She had worked hard, prepared all night, and been honest, only to be treated like a piece of garbage by a man who thought he was a god just because he sat in a high chair. "Who the hell does he think he is?" she hissed under her breath, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Her face was flushed with a mixture of anger and shame. CEO? More like a heartless monster. Brainless? He's the one who's brainless for asking such stupid trap questions. YN was so blinded by her rage that she didn't even look at the signs. She was stomping down the executive corridor, looking for the quickest way out. She saw a set of gleaming golden elevator doors with a sign that read, "Strictly for executives and authorized members only." In her current state, YN didn't care. She pressed the button aggressively. When the doors slid open, she stepped into an elevator that looked more like a small, luxurious room. It had velvet carpeting, a crystal chandelier, and gold-trimmed mirrors. She stepped inside and turned around, not realizing she wasn't alone. Standing in the corner was a tall, well-built man in an expensive grey three-piece suit. He wore sleek glasses that gave him an air of supreme intelligence and calm. This was Kim Namjoon, the COO and director of Jeon Enterprises, and the mastermind known as RM in the underworld. The elevator began its smooth descent. YN, thinking she was either alone or that the man next to her was just another busy employee who wouldn't care, continued her tirade. She waved her resume folder in the air as if she were lecturing the walls. "Brainless! Absolutely brainless!" she shouted, her voice echoing in the small space. "He sits there in his fancy suit and thinks he can insult anyone who walks in. You may leave. As if I was begging for his charity. Mr. Jeon Jungkook, your handsome face can't hide the fact that you have the personality of a brick." Namjoon, who had been focused on his tablet, slowly looked up. A faint, amused smile tugged at the corners of his lips. In all his years at the company, he had never heard anyone, especially not a young girl, insult his younger brother so passionately inside his own building. "Excuse me." Namjoon's deep, resonant voice broke the silence. E/N jumped, nearly dropping her folder. She spun around, her eyes wide as she finally noticed the man standing just a few feet away. Her face turned from angry red to embarrassed crimson in a split second. "Oh, I am so sorry. I thought I was alone," she stammered, her heart racing for a completely different reason now. Namjoon stepped closer, his expression kind but curious. "It's quite all right, but I couldn't help but overhear. You seem to have a very strong opinion of our CEO. I take it the interview didn't go well?" Something about Namjoon's calm energy made YN lose her filter. She sighed, her shoulders dropping. "Well, sir, that man is a nightmare. He asked a question that was designed to make me fail, and then he called me brainless before kicking me out. Is that how the #1 company in Korea treats people?" Namjoon hummed thoughtfully. He knew Jungkook had been in a foul mood lately due to some messy mafia business, but he also knew that Jungkook needed someone who wouldn't be intimidated by him. This girl had just called the most feared man in Seoul brainless to a stranger's face. She had spirit. "What did he ask you?" Namjoon asked, genuinely interested. YN explained the $500 million error scenario and her response. She even did a little imitation of Jungkook's cold, "Get out," which made Namjoon chuckle internally. "Interesting," Namjoon said, adjusting his glasses. "May I see your resume, Miss?" "YN," she replied, hesitantly handing over her folder. Namjoon scanned her credentials. He saw her high grades, her volunteer work, and her previous experience. But more than that, he saw the fire in her eyes. Jungkook needed a manager who would stand up to him, not a yes man. The elevator reached the ground floor. Namjoon handed the resume back and looked at her with a dimpled smile. "Congratulations, YN. You're hired. You can start tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. YN froze, her hand halfway to her folder. "What?" "But Mr. Jungkook rejected me. He said I don't belong here." Namjoon stepped out of the elevator as his security team moved in to surround him. He turned back one last time. "Mr. Jungkook is the CEO, but I am the director and COO. When it comes to management staff, my word is final. Pick up your appointment letter from the VIP reception desk." YN stood in the lobby, completely stunned. She had gone from being insulted and fired to being hired by the director himself in the span of 5 minutes. A small, triumphant smile began to form on her lips. "Just you wait, Mr. Jeon Jungkook," she whispered. "The brainless girl is coming back.